This video is going to look at adding materials or textures to our site and then manipulating those textures. So before I've done that, we do need a sun. I've added a manual sun, so I've gone to lights, chosen V-Ray and V-Ray sun and dragged that in. As you can see, that's here. There's quite a few options there. You can also go to create, lights, and add a daylight system. And that just gives you control over the time of day, the location, like Melbourne, for example. I've also added cameras. So from within camera here, V-Ray, I've dragged in a couple of V-Ray cameras, physical cameras. One more quick thing on those two parameters. So if you have a camera, I'm just going to go within that camera and you come over to the modify panel. If you find that you're not getting the kind of aesthetic you want, it's too dark, it's too washed out, have a look at these parameters. If you know something about photography, it's going to be a little bit easier. So you can change the f-stop and the shutter speed to make it either brighter, darker. You can also do the same with the sun by manipulating the size multiplier and the intensity multiplier. Intensity, just how bright it is, for example. Size, it's going to work with the shadows as well. So a larger sun is going to give more hazy shadows, whereas a smaller, like 1, is going to give really defined shadow outlines. So now that we have put in cameras and a sun, there's a couple of options in terms of adding materials. You can either come to the Cosmos browser. That takes a little while to load, so I've just clicked on the Cosmos browser down here, and that's going to give you lots of options in terms of, say, adding people, for example. You can add all these different materials. There's lots of 3D models. That's a bit slow at the moment, so I'm just going to close that, and I'm going to open the other option, is the V-Ray material library. So we have quite a few textures here. So I'm just going to click on this. So let's say I want to make this a brick texture. I'm going to select the geometry and then right click on the particular texture I want and then apply to selected objects. As you can see, that texture has been added. This initial aesthetic is not going to be what I want most likely. So I'm just to see what that looks like, rather than rendering it and waiting for that process to happen, I'm just going to go to interactive production rendering. And that's just going to kind of do a progressive render and let us see what that might look like. Okay. So when you initially add it, it's going to look like this. So that's map that texture onto my object. But what we want to do to have a bit of control and manipulate that texture is add a UVW map. So I'm going to just search in the modifier panel for UVW map and add that modifier. Now at the moment that has mapped that on, assuming that it's a plane like I've done on this particular surface here. What we actually want for this, there's lots of options. I would choose box. And then what you can do, as you can see, those are far too big to be bricks. What you can do is change these parameters down here. Changing these, you have to be tricky because it's mapping it onto the dimensions of this object. So if I was to just put this all to 10, 10, and 10, those bricks are going to have probably a bit of a funny shape. So what I'm going to do is just change the tile mapping. So that texture's in a little tile, and then I'm just going to change the size of that. So you can work around with that to try and get the size that you're after. I've just added 6, and then you can see if that's the size you want. If it's not, you can make that smaller or larger. I'll make another video in a minute. This is just looking at one particular object. If you wanted to have different materials within the same object, there is an option for that, which I'll show you in a minute.